Welcome to the Rollwise Podcast, the weekly show that explores all things tabletop RPGs. My name is Mike. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my fellow RPG enthusiasts, Brent and Jeff. Say hello, Brent.
Hello, everybody.
Say hello, Jeff.
Hey, everyone.
So settle in, and let's kick off this week's show. This week has got quite a bit going on in terms of, I guess, across the tabletop spectrum. We're not limiting ourselves to the tabletop RPG space. And Brent is going to give us a little bit of an update on one of his and my favorite games, Warhammer 40K, even though I haven't played it for several years now because I'm too poor. We're going to talk a little bit about D&D Direct, the latest marketing push from the Wizards of the Coast folks, and some of the updates that they have about the future of their products. And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about Session Zero. We had a Pathfinder Session Zero last night for our upcoming Pathfinder campaign. And, of course, we decided that would be some good things to discuss because I think Session Zero is probably one of the most important foundational steps that you can do to get a good vibe with your gaming group, let's say. So I hope you guys are ready. And I'm going to pass off the proverbial baton over to Brent. And why don't you let us know a little bit about 40K 10th edition?
So yeah, I have a couple like newsy type items for the role playing and / gaming sphere. One of which is last week at Adepticon, which is one of the nation's biggest 40K tournaments. They did announce the release of Warhammer 40,000 10th edition this summer, which is going to be kind of interesting because one of the big things that they made with the announcement is the rules, the core rules and the codexes. I think they're calling them indexes now, are all actually going to be free. And then they even said their list builder will work upon release, which is something that'll be really nice because the current one doesn't work very well. But so that's something that's kind of interesting. They'll be making most of their gain off of the sculpts and models that they're producing now, as their rules will be free. So if you're looking to get into the game, it'll be a good time to kind of restart. I haven't played in a few years either, so it'll be kind of a good refresher for me with the new rules coming out. So that's kind of the news about 40K. And the other announcement that I kind of wanted to let everybody know is Melsonia Arts Council, who are the makers of a game that we talk about, and I know I mentioned quite a bit, called Troika, which is a kind of sci-fi, sci-fantasy OSR style game set in a surreal universe. They are having a 50% off sale on pretty much all of their things on their website, their summer sale. So if you're looking for a new game, Troika is really brilliant. I've enjoyed every bit of it that I've read. I suggest anybody who wants to check it out, it's a good time to go and look for physical books. So yeah.
No, and I think that's definitely on our pile of, I'm not going to say pile of shame again. It's going to be our pile of games to be played. We've been definitely investing a lot of time and energy in finding the right games to sell some of the stories that we have. And Troika just looks like a really interesting game that uses the old school Renaissance style.
I think
role playing. So
yeah, and thinking about it, I do think that Troika would be good potentially for a night where you need a one shot because character creation is like minutes long. So you could make characters and then do like a one shot in one night over a couple hours. So it's a quality game.
I just wanted to follow up and ask about the 40K. So there'll be no physical rule books or codex indices, if that's what they're calling them, available, or there's going to be electronic versions for free, and if you really wanted to buy a physical book, you still could.
They haven't really announced entirely what it's going to look like, but I believe what's probably going to happen is they still will have physical indexes with both the fluff and background information and the rules, but the actual rules and data cards for the figures and the armies will all be free through their site. So that'll be
an interesting decision.
It is very interesting.
Yeah. So. Well, I have to say that as a legacy 40K player that played a long, long time ago, I mean, the hardest part about it, other than, of course, buying, assembling, and painting, large numbers of armies and coming up with all the tactical strategies you needed to achieve supremacy against your opponents, was hauling a bunch of various books around to make sure that you had the right shit when you needed it. Because, I mean, honestly, like in my opinion, I like the books. I like the art. I like the extra little lore, the little gray boxes you got in the books and stuff like that. Because I mean, the one thing about 40K that I think most people may not necessarily understand is that it has some of the best lore for a thing that's been going on 40 plus years. So I mean, it is up there at top tier level. It is a lot to unpack because it's a lot of it is hidden in these little tiny nuggets that kind of just give you the feel for the game. So I will miss those, but at the same time, I won't miss the books.
Well, I think you'll be able to pick up the books, and I think it'll have all the lore in it still for your specific army. It'll just be the rules will be free. Because they're still going to want to sell the books, I think, they want people to play and buy models exclusively. Sure. One of the things that I really is true is I know in the current iteration of game towards the end of 9th edition, there's the core rulebook, whatever codex that you're using, plus they've been releasing these fluff/way to play books called Arts of Omens, and I think there's 5 of them now. So like potentially you could be carrying a small library everywhere you go if you're trying to carry all the books. And I know for any like supported GW style tournament, like I think the one at Adepticon and the one like at the LVO every year, like those have GW prize support and stuff like that. So like they kind of ask that you have the books that you're pulling your army from with you, so they know that you bought them and you didn't just pirate the shit. So it'll be kind of nice to be able to like just have your your data cards or whatever and be able to, because you're already packing, like as someone who's gone to a tournament and had to pack an army in a carry-on bag, you're already packing a ton of shit when you're going to these events. So it'll be nice to have, like, you don't have to pack an extra 50 pounds of books too.
I just assumed everybody, carried their armies around, on hand trucks and dollies at the convention center. So I'm thinking the books do nothing but go on the bottom and help stabilize the load.
You do see a lot of rolling cases. You do see
I'm sure there are
the fancy couple $100 rolling cases where people have like a handle and stuff, but like that's like $300 of foam and then plastic, so you don't have any room for books in there. No, you're protecting your very, very valuable models that you spend hundreds of hours painting. I get that. Yeah. I get that. But I will say it is great going to a 40K tournament because, like, when you go to the LVO, there's hundreds of people in these casinos, but you always can tell the 40K players because they always are carrying the shit that you recognize. It's like, oh, you see that? Yeah, that's definitely a 40K player. He's got 2 bags of clothes and 3 bags of armies that he's lugging around and a display board.
The joke is you can't recognize them is because none of them look like they've been out in the sun for 6 months. They've all been painting to get ready for the LVO.
So here's another weird thing is apparently a big thing in the Warhammer community now is also like getting fit with your 40, like
nice.
Fit 40K, I think is a YouTube channel. So like there's like buff 40K players now. So no, you can't really.
I think there always has been some buff ones. I just like the size of the armies and the amount of time it takes to paint. I'm just imagining that every waking hour that's not at work is you painting for months in advance of LVO. Unless you can afford to farm that out.
That's probably true. If you are painting a new army for the LVO particularly, you probably are painting for a couple months. That's probably true.
Well, but one thing, of course, to mention is that, of course, if, with the focus on fitness, I mean, why would you just play as an Astarte when you could be an Astarte? I mean, really,
they take a lot of chemicals. So stay natural, folks. That's all I'm saying.
Hey. But well, I do have to say though, I did look at some of the minis, and I thought one of the comments that I saw was that the Terminators are going to be bigger and more distinct, and that is, I'm 100% okay with those Terminators getting a little bit more swole. So
you don't know this, but I don't know if you know this actually, but so a couple years ago they decided to do a thing. Basically, what they wanted to do is they wanted to make the Space Marine line bigger. So they introduced something in the fluff. When Gilman returned, they introduced something in the fluff called Primaris. Mm-hmm. And so what the Space Marines do is they go through another rebirth, and they become Primaris Marines who are bigger than normal Marines. So these are going to be Primaris-sized Terminator models. So they're going to be huge. But the funny part is I always thought this was funny that they had to have a they made a fluff reason for it, because they really could have just said your Space Marine models are bigger now, and like no one would have cared. Like they would have just been like, oh, I have to buy all my Space Marines again. But they're going to do that anyways. So
And I mean, if you look at some of the earlier MK armors, like they kind of did get bigger over
mhm.
time. Because especially like I think it was MK3. Was that the one with the pointy beak nose? Do you
Yeah, the
remember?
beaky.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so like I remember some of those models being just kind of they were pewter and they were tight, the ones that I remember
Mhm.
seeing. And they were, and then of course you get to the more recent plastics, the ones that I was playing with, and they were just naturally larger than the beakies. And
Well,
so
and the way is they did it with some models anyways. Like all of the
mhm.
Death Guard releases were all bigger than regular Marines, and it's like, so why did you do it with this model line and not just do it with the Space Marines and go like, oh yeah, your tactical squads, they're just bigger now.
Mhm.
Like you didn't need to implement this whole fluff reason. I mean, the fluff's pretty cool, but it was just kind of funny that they definitely made a model design choice that impacted the fluff. But yeah, so now the Terminators are going to be much bigger models, which are cool because they're like an iconic. Like
Mhm.
a Terminator is one of the iconic Space Marine things. Like you see it on the cover of almost everything. So
Yeah. But you're never gonna. I think with those Primaris Space Marine Terminators, I think they would really have a hard time in Space Hulk. They'd just be wedged in those hallways, and the Gene Stealers would just be shredding their armor still. Yep, that's how
they
it
just
goes.
make room.
They just make
They
room.
just make room.
What did he eat? The Space Hulk? What is happening here? Um, So, so yeah. So thanks for the updates. 10th edition. If you are into tabletop games, I mean, if I could paint worth anything, I would definitely love to give these models. But I just know that they would sit near a painting station, unpainted for years. But so some of the new models look fucking fantastic, and
Even
there are
those of
just
us that love painting, you have models that sit near the painting station for years. Trust me.
it's true. So if you're a 40K player and you like the game, let us know if you plan on playing it, how it goes. You know, if you've been a long time 40K player, all that stuff. What do you like about it? And of course, also stop by and look at the Troika stuff too, because you can always find a new fun game. So, with that being said, transition time. Whoop, let's hit the D&D Direct. Would it be called a sizzle reel? I'm not really into the industry lingo, but is that like a sizzle reel, or is this just marketing
Kind of,
101?
yeah. I guess you could call it that. I maybe, but
Okay.
sure. It
I
was it
would
was
call
it
it
was all marketing. I think Brent called it an ad. I almost called you
I call
Brad.
it a commercial.
Brent an
You can
ad.
call me Brad. Brad. But yeah, I look like a Brad. No, I would call it a commercial. It was firmly in the commercial territory, in my opinion. So
So I think just to kind of break down what D&D Direct offered is that first of all, you know, it's really just the hype reel for a lot of the stuff that's up and coming. It offered a little bit of information about how D&D is partnering with Minecraft, which I mean, the way that they were partnering with Minecraft, I would love to have that kind of situation where you could go in, play a game, and all that kind of stuff. The problem is, me and Minecraft have never gotten along. Like I just there's all those people. I think there's millions of Minecraft players, right? There's literally millions, entire channels on YouTube dedicated to Minecraft. I mean, it's a very popular game that's been around forever, and just I never got into it. I tried. It's like
I,
that. Those games like that, Terraria, some of those other ones where you can spend hundreds, if not thousands, of hours playing. Like I tapped out. I hate to say it.
I I've played. My nephews really like it. My nieces do as well.
Mhm.
I'm not any good at all, but it's fun. It's amazing how much time can pass while you're building whatever you're building, and trying to stay alive if you're getting attacked by the wandering monsters. But the
Mhm.
D&D thing, I was like, wow, this looks
Yeah.
intense.
It looks pretty cool. I mean, and I don't know how it's going to be introduced. I didn't actually take a look into it, but I mean, just the dragon, like you could import monsters. There was like a beholder in there. I thought all that was pretty neat. So, I mean,
it'll be neat for. I think it'll be really neat for Minecraft players. I think it's a really neat crossover
mhm.
kind of thing. I think that's neat, and I think that's one of the ways that when they talk about making more money with D&D, I think that's one of the best ways that they could do it.
Well,
Is
it
to
helps the company make more money, but I think it also exposes, this hobby of ours, of all of ours, to new people.
Mhm.
Not everybody's going to get into role playing the way that we did. Everybody's story is kind of unique, and there'll just be some people that have heard about it and haven't been interested. But boy, if it ties into Minecraft, maybe it's something worth looking into. It probably won't generate a ton of people, but that was the theme for me through this whole production was, tie-ins, capitalizing on the movie coming out. I guess striking while the iron's hot, I guess.
Yeah.
Action figures. The action figures were interesting. About Minecraft and D&D. I mean, one of the big things about like getting back to bringing the 40K thing into it, like 40K's like two biggest spikes in their game have been when Dawn of War came out. That video game, there's a huge spike in sales, and then I think when Space Marine, the original Space Marine came out, there was another spike, and I'm sure when Space Marine 2 comes out, there'll be a big spike where people are playing the game and they're going to be like, "Oh, what's this about?" And so, video game crossovers and tie-ins I think they're important, and I think it'll be good for making them. And that's more what I meant by making money, is the exposure that they're going to get to potentially new people is going to be high.
It's true. Well, and I think it's good. Anybody that you can bring into the hobby, even if, I mean, again, we have been, for some reason, on kind of a pessimistic slant about D&D just in general. But I mean, we played D&D for many years, so maybe it's just the natural cycle. We'll get optimistic about it sometime. They did also mention Honor Among Thieves, and did you guys take a look and see what the Rotten Tomato scores were currently before it opens 89. Up on its by the critics, but 91 by the audience. So what's interesting to me is that seems like a solid movie. I mean, I could have been wrong when last time we talked about it, and I said, hey, I don't know if this is going to launch the D&D cinematic universe, but maybe this gets some executives a little bit excited, and maybe they invest in some long-term projects that actually has some cohesion to it and makes sense as to why they're doing it, and has kind of a meta plot that's threaded through it all. I mean, maybe could be.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it does this weekend, since John Wick crushed box office last weekend. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep that going. This might be a bad week.
They waited a week.
This might be bad. It's very good they waited a week, but it still might not be a great time, because all those people who didn't go see it on the premiere might be like, "Oh, well, let's go see John Wick this weekend," and so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But
I have to say that
money wise,
I wish I could see John Wick in the theaters, but it was already hard enough to go see the Dungeons and Dragons movie. It just being like, "Hey, wife, take the child. I'm out."
It is hard when you have an infant or near infant at home. It's a lot of work for everyone.
Yeah. So I think out of the other things that kind of came from this D&D Direct marketing stuff, I really think one of the biggest items was really the virtual tabletop, and you got to see a sit down with the game being played. I would not going to say live, but at least being played in a setting where they were actual players and the DM running a short session, and they were kind of showing off how the virtual tabletop looked. And so, I mean, from your guys' impression, what did you think?
I think that there's applications where it's kind of cool to see your imaginary space, realized in kind of 3D. The hard part for me is that I'm sure if the three of us were playing a game right now and you described a tavern, that the picture in Brent's head and the picture in my head would be entirely different. I'm also sure that if we were playing on that virtual tabletop, that neither of us would have pictured the tavern that was there. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think there's places where I think some people are really going to love it, and I think for combat and stuff and moving around a room and having to avoid obstacles, I think it adds some depth and some realism and some things that people can get behind. But it's all in how much you invest in it and how much you're there to use it, right? We've all played games. we've all played D&D without maps.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, if you go back to the beginning of time, right? Well, the beginning of D&D, literally one person's job in the party was to draw the effing map as things got exposed.
Mhm.
You know, and we've all played without a map. So if we've played without a map, we could play without a tabletop. But I like the technology, except I have one criticism. Like, why did all the characters have bases like they were actual physical figures? Like, they're in a virtual world, they can stand up just on their feet. They don't need a round base. That one blew my mind. I was like,
that is a very interesting design choice that they have made. To put the bases on the models like
Mhm.
they're minis and not like they're actual people. So I agree that's a little weird. I prefer Theater of the Mind, so I think the map is neat. A couple things that I think will be interesting to see is how well they cater to like homebrew content.
Mhm.
Because like if you're making it up yourself, they might not have a map that necessarily fits what your vision of it is, and if they're going to have an ability to like build that from scratch, or if it's really going to push the sort of hey, play our adventures sort of style of things, buy our adventures for $2.99 and upload these maps. And then that's another thing is like, and then my other concern is that just that like microtransactions, like, oh, you want a different tavern, that's going to be $1.99. You want a different dungeon, that's going to be $2.99. And those microtransactions to be able to play on those more varied tabletops. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it plans out. How it plans out. I think there is definitely a market for it. I think a lot of the people who got into role playing during like the pandemic and stuff like that, and who aren't as used to Theater of the Mind and are used to more virtual tabletop style stuff, I think they're going to love it. Whether or not that'll be good for other games besides D&D, it will take time to tell, I think. So
Yeah. No, I think those are some pretty good observations. I think the one thing that I do want to let people know is if you didn't have a chance to see the virtual tabletop, go and look at it. I mean, honestly, I think from a virtual tabletop perspective, it does a fantastic job with the assets that they use. I mean, I think they used an Unreal Engine or something like that to basically put
yeah, I
the
think it's using
scaffolding
Unreal
on.
5. So
Yeah, so
it looks good.
It's a top-notch visual experience. I think when it gets to it, and I honestly, based on what I remember reading and all that kind of stuff, I think it's going to try to have a lot of flexibility to it, but it's never, of course, going to be as flexible as your imagination, right? You can never do that. Now that being said, though, I think Jeff, you made a good point that people how they envision these things is always going to be different. In a tactical role playing game where there's combat and those kind of things, I think this is where it does lend itself to being very helpful. Is that especially with all the things that were built in, it looks like if you cast a spell, boom, it calculates your ranges, does all those things, it rolls the dice in the virtual tabletop. I think there's something satisfying about rolling real dice, just my own personal thing. I prefer real dice over the virtual dice and all that, but I think it does a lot to really just, at least from a virtual perspective, it does a ton. Now, the one thing that I can't get out of my mind is I cannot get the just four people sitting around a table staring at their laptops out of my head. Like, I mean, as a
Well,
person who did StarCraft lands when I was in college and stuff like that, I mean, you weren't focused on the other people in your presence, and it even kind of like made the effort to pretend like they were kind of doing the minutia. Oh, I see this stool, and I mean that's so.
I think it's a generational thing, though. I'm not trying to. I don't want people to take this wrong. This is not a Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. I don't care. But I think that we now have a lot of people who grew up with screens. The three of us are very technology forward, I think, and I think we use a lot of screens, but they weren't natural. There's something that we've adapted to where my nephews had screens in their hands from the time they could crawl.
Mm-hmm.
To them, a screen is an outreach of them. And I think that some groups, again, it's do what works for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if that's what you love, all sitting around with your laptops, but sometimes it's easier to carry the laptop and have a virtual sheet where you not have to have an actual pen and paper. I own more dice than I care to admit on this podcast. Maybe someday, now that we have video, we can show our dice collections. But I was thinking of it as you said that you like the dice, Mike. I haven't rolled a physical die in the games we've been playing because we've been using Discord, because we've been using bots to roll our dice. I haven't rolled a physical die in a few years now.
and to me, it's a very unsatisfying experience to fail and not have a dice that you can blame when you. I mean, there's just a personal, visceral reaction to that one dice that's just, I'm done with you.
Oh, I swap out dice frequently.
Yeah, so there's a few things that about that. One of the reasons that they might have minis, the minis in the virtual tabletop as a game, is because you can still market them as minis. And so if you have custom minis, like you want to buy Drist, you can say you can buy the mini off of their store. That's the conspiratorial part of me thinking that they can send minis that way. The other thing that I would say is I never even crossed my mind that people might be sitting at the same table and using virtual tabletop. I just think you have a lot of people that won't get together anymore. And I do feel like that's kind of a shame. I think you'll get a lot of people that just play remotely, even if they live in the same town or they could get together physically. You'll just have a lot of people that meet through a screen again, which I think it'll be interesting. Like, it's been good for us because we're all in different, like, pretty different places. So it's easy for us. And I think that's good for the hobby. I will say that's good for the hobby, is being able to open it up to people that are farther away. But I think it is kind of a shame if you don't get together with your friends anymore and physically roll dice.
Yeah,
I agree with that. No, I agree with that 100%. But it struck me because I've been seeing all these tutorials, right, where people are essentially enclosing TVs in tables, right, to show stuff. Could you use the virtual tabletop? I'm assuming that you could, right? You could log in through that screen and have the virtual tabletop, on the table that you're all playing around, with plexiglass over the top.
Yeah, as long as they're flat maps, it should be fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't built one, but I have watched several people. There's several tutorials.
I have an extra TV. I was thinking about that the other day. That I could make a little stand and put that TV on that table and use it as a flat map reference.
Well, and I think and Jeff, to your point, I think people do that kind of stuff all the time, and and if you decided that that's how your virtual tabletop was going to go, it just puts the onus on one person to like manage it. Probably the DM to be like, where do you want me to move your mini? I mean, maybe they all get laptops and do that, or maybe they all, high tech get iPads that help them. They're all loaded into this, doing all the work for them and all that stuff. So I mean, it could be useful. And like I said, and honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. There was a point in which we were all gaming remotely, in which I go virtual tabletops, and I put them like really high. I really appreciated them because when we were doing like Lost Mines and all that kind of stuff, it made it so much easier from the GM perspective to like sort everything remotely because everyone was kind of focused on the map and all of those kind of things, and I felt like I had less straying, we'll call it, because sometimes when people are kind of left to their own device and a description is going on and it's pretty much only an auditory description, sometimes people are like, I'm just checking Reddit real quick, it's not really my turn, and all of a sudden, and it's just like when you're in a meeting at work and now your name's being called and you're like, oh fuck, what was the last question? And everyone's like, you were not listening at all. Where you were like, I absolutely was not listening. Busted.
2 points. One, I think to Jeff's point, I think what he was kind of talking about is having, or what I've seen is there's the flat table and then there's like a piece of plexiglass over it. And you just have the hex map or the square map. And then you have figures on top of it and you use it as a physical map with the screen the screen as the map.
Oh, okay.
You could do that. I think if you could plug the VTT into that instead and power it through one person's computer. The moving is harder. Yeah. Sorry, Brent. Go ahead.
The moving is harder, but no. The other thing that I was going to say is one of the things that I also worry about with the virtual tabletop is it's easy to make the game a combat game, almost exclusively a video game if you're in a situation where, it does all these cool things. It's just easier for me to design combat because it has all these resources for combat. It doesn't necessarily have resources for actual role-playing parts, and that's another thing that I worry about a lot, is D&D turning into a video game that one person runs for other people.
Yeah. And I mean, they've had iterations of that, like the Neverwinter or whatever it was. You could build campaigns in there. And I mean, I don't think it was necessarily super role play. I mean, I could be wrong, but I always got the impression that it was kind of like, basically dungeon delving on a video game server that somebody created. So,
yeah. I mean, every group needs to play the way they want to, but
yeah, and don't get me wrong, some people are going to love it for that, and I say more power to you. But I think one of the things that you might see with this is that niche between those indie games that are role play.
Mm-hmm.
You see the divide between those two be a much bigger separation. Like D&D becomes almost its own hobby with its virtual tabletop versus actual role playing games. So,
yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, time will tell. And obviously, if there's a way to access this without spending gobs and gobs of money, I'd still test it. I would still get in there and roll up my sleeves, get under the hood a little bit, and see how it plays. Because there's a time and place for all of this. I mean, as a gaming group, we play so many different types of games that we may decide that that's going to benefit one of the games we do want to run. So, I mean, not to say it would ever be. I'm not going to like boycott it prematurely. Unless they're obviously doing something they shouldn't be doing, like exploiting people,
like trying to ruin people's livelihoods by pulling their OGL.
Basically, I mean, that wound is still a little fresh. So there is, if they continued down that path, or they started with the dark robes, and they started saying, my time is now, and cackling with lightning fingers and all that stuff. Then, I mean, there may be some other red flags that come up between now and then, but if everything stays the course, I would probably give it a try. So, okay. So, I mean, other than that, I think the other things that they had the they had a documentary. There we go. They had a documentary that was going to be done by Joe Magliano. That was going to be kind of cataloging the 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, while interesting, I'm not really a documentarian or documentorian.
You don't watch documentaries?
Documentary watcher, I think is the.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't watch a ton. I mean, I watch some. I mean, they're very interesting when I get sucked in, but I usually, it's not the first thing I turn to when I've got the remote in hand and I'm trying to find something to watch. Like that's usually a couple stages down, unless it's something that I've absolutely wanted to watch. Like I don't know why I was so interested. Like, for example, on Netflix, there was that documentary that was about the like over in Massachusetts or something, those two crime labs that had those two people that were falsifying like drug charges. It was like a super crazy interesting documentary that I just got sucked into. And it's like tens of thousands of people's lives were upended because of these people just like lying about, like one of them was lying about the lab reports, and the other one was just doing crack cocaine and doing lab reports so they could get more done in time. It's so weird. It was crazy.
I don't know if the D&D one's going to be quite that edgy, but I hope it's I hope it's good. I hope it's another door into the hobby for some people.
Well, that's the thing, is like a lot of what we know as now I want to say documentarian things.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for that, Mike. Documentaries. The reason that people watch most documentaries is because they are about those edgy cases. So, like, I don't know if you guys have ever watched. I've watched on Discovery. They have that like America's Toys, and like the history of America's Toys.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if it's like that, they're not very interesting, very really. And so it'll be interesting to see how they're going to make. I assume really what it's going to be is just a bunch of celebrities talking about how they got in D&D and how it started and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious. I don't know if I'll be able to watch the whole thing.
No, there's enough scandal with that original group where people were forced out, and it became a chance to monetize, and then there was power gathering. I think they're going to touch on a bunch of that stuff.
I don't think it's going to be the hard copy Gary Gygax story. I just don't think it's going to be.
Now,
that.
It'll be
We'll see. I think
interesting.
it's going to be a very positive,
Okay,
very
that
positive
could
and
be.
bright portrayal of D&D.
yeah, Wizards of the Coast has never done anything wrong ever, and TSR never did anything wrong ever. They didn't litigate all of their enemies to dust. Like none of these things ever
Satanic
happened.
Panic, that never happened.
No,
Satanic Panic, that never happened. We're not talking about that at all.
I mean, I do say that they, like as Jeff said, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the beginning as the was growing and developing and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they had like, journals in the back room that were, Gygax's personal memoirs that were never published,
Hmm.
and that talked about how like there was a guy who had the idea that he actually had to, steal it from him or something like that.
Push him down his flight of stairs.
Tom Hanks did that Tunnels and Trolls movie or whatever it
Maze
was.
Monsters.
Mazes and
Mazes and
Monsters.
Monsters.
Right. Sorry. Tunnels and Trolls was an actual game. I'm not trying to
And he was a
slander
fifth level
anyone.
wizard. And he was a fifth level wizard. And he tried to stab a bunch of his friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that wasn't that's exactly what the young hobby needed as it was in its growing stages.
Based on a book that they've proved is empirically not true.
Right.
After the fact, like they talked to the author and they're like, she made this shit up almost exclusively for sure. It'll be interesting to see what they touch on.
I'll watch it.
They probably won't say that the reason there's 400 pole arms in Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is because that was Gary Gygax's major in college. But you have to look other places for those little tidbits.
Yeah. So I mean, so needless to say, I think it's TBD on whether it's going to be a fluff piece, which would be, I think, a disappointing waste of D&D history because there's probably some really good juicy bits in there. But I think that it seems like that could be where it leads to.
Well, I think Hasbro's doing it, so I think it's going to be.
Yeah, it's likely a celebration of 50 years.
Yeah, I feel like that's what it's going to be. It's going to be. Awesome D&D is.
I personally hope they touch on the fact that it wasn't called a role-playing game. That was controversial, back in the 70s. Like it wasn't called a role-playing game till the mid 80s because the core group that started it, I don't remember what they had against role-playing, but there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people making a lot of content out there. If you're interested in this stuff, search YouTube. You will find somebody who did as in-depth a thing as you can do without getting, people alone in a hotel room with the swinging light, disguising their voice and their features. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in the history of this hobby.
Yeah, and they probably won't talk about D&D and porn stars or anything like that. So, I don't know how interesting it's going to be.
That's your benchmark is whether or not they talk about the porn stars that play in the game. Is
no porn stars. Brent's like, I got to check out. I have to actually play. I can't be wasting time.
All right.
I'm just saying. I think there's going to be a lot of weird, controversial stuff that they don't talk about.
Probably.
Instead, it'll be Vin Diesel talking about how it influenced him being in 27 Fast and Furious movies.
It could be interesting, I guess, as long as he does it from the persona of Groot.
Well, if I remember right, one of the tattoos on his character in Triple X was the name of his D&D character.
Oh, really? That's fun.
Because I think in the 30-year celebration, they had that book come out, that like silver covered book come out, and it had the foreword from him in it. So he talked a lot about how he played D&D when he was younger and how it inspired him to become an actor. So I'm sure he'll be involved in the show. So
I kind of wish it inspired me to become an actor, but I probably would have not made it.
It's okay. So I think we can close out the D&D Direct stuff with what they were talking about in 2023, and beyond, kind of, because it seems like they've got their kind of like their big plot points and everything along those lines, and then they're also talking about some of the expansion content that they have. And what I remember is that they basically have 4 either adventures or source books or something like that. And you have Bigby Presents The Glory of Giants. You have Fandelver and Below, The Shattered Obelisk, Planescape, Adventures in the Multiverse, and The Book of Many Things. And I think out of those, I mean, it's interesting that they're, of course, expanding on Phandelver, because that was kind of the 5th edition, like, let's get you starting to play. And I mean, we ran Phandelver. I've run it with other groups. It's a nice, concise little D&D module that's a lot of fun to play, and I think it's got a lot of variety. And I mean, people play it generally the same, but there's a lot of little areas where people definitely did not play it the same. So I think
I bet not many people make that one NPC the hero like we did.
Hey, I mean,
yes, ladies and gentlemen, our group was so bad that an NPC came in and killed the last boss for us.
It was a mistake on my part, but it was a funny mistake.
You say it was a mistake, but I think all of our player characters were happy it happened. So we were like, "Fuck, we were gonna die." Shit.
It was an accidental. It was an accidental non-TPK because of something that happened, but it's okay. I mean, like I said, everybody plays the game a little bit differently. So the one thing, I guess, the one comment that I have is that, or two comments I should say, is that, first of all, Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse could be really cool to get back to. What do they call it? Sigil. I think that's how they said it in the video.
Sigil, yeah.
Is that I think they said Sigil, which kind of threw my brain because I always called it Sigil myself. But that's maybe I've been wrong for the 20 years that Planescape books have been out. But I think that I've always liked the Planescape setting. I've always liked the art associated with Planescape, and just the kind of like the crazy variety that is associated with what's going on there. So I have two things. Is if they do it right, I'll probably force you guys to play that no matter what, because I just like the idea of running around in this. I think it was called the City of Doors or something like that. That's Sigil.
Something like that, yeah.
I definitely loved the old video game Planescape Torment. That was the old isometric game that came out many, many years ago. It was so much fun. I played that. I played the enhanced edition when it came out on like a Steam release many years later. I love Planescape so much. However, there is part of me that remembers that Spelljammer release that goes, "Don't you fuck me on this, guys.
Yeah.
Don't you dare."
I kind of feel the same, almost exactly how you feel about the Deck of Many Things release.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is kind of a cool part of the lore to me. But it can easily go sideways. If it's any good, I would be interested in exploring that. But, I don't know if you as a DM will do that for us, because, some of the things that can happen in the deck are positive. Mike as a DM is not very, we'll just say, giving.
Very miserly.
Most of the things in the deck are not positive.
No, they're but they're fun.
I wonder if there's a Pathfinder equivalent.
We'll have to look,
because there's an adventure path for you.
Exactly. Or you could make you literally could make one.
We'll see how sandboxy this game gets.
Well, I guess we will find out how it is. And to answer your question, there is a Deck of Many Things in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It is on the Archives of Nethys. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you guys would run into it, especially at first level, but I think
that's the best time.
That's the best time.
The best time. We can't handle anything that the deck.
Yeah, we can't handle anything. Yeah, anything bad that happens will just die. So
about Planescape, I will say one thing. Planescape is such a beloved kind of setting. I have a feeling that people are going to be disappointed. I hope it's good, but will it be no space combat? Bad? I don't know in your space game, but it'll be interesting to see how it comes out.
Yeah,
and I never have. And I would point out I never have to worry about this because they've pretty much said that they're never going to do my favorite setting again. So I never have to worry about worrying if they screw it up or not.
That's true. But I mean, the thing is I'll probably be the sucker that buys it, just because I've owned and lost Planescape a couple times at this point. Because I bought them originally when I had them, and then at some point I lost a lot of them, and then I've repurchased some of the holes in there, and then I've lost them again since that was like what, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's old books that I never used.
Yeah.
But I still like the art and all those kind of things. But as for the Deck of Many Things, honestly, I will, if the adventure is at all looks like it could be a lot of fun, I'll probably pick it up just to kind of run you guys through it, because I think it could be a lot of fun. I mean, I know we haven't
It'll be fun.
necessarily played with the Deck of Many Things like as a gaming group recently. I think the last time, it's been a long time since I've even introduced that into a game, just because of its chaotic and unpredictable nature.
Good way to put it.
It's like, I mean, I think that and the bag of beans, I think, are the two things that just don't tend to make
I can't think of any game I've ever played where we've had magic items that are that epic. Like, I've never been in a game where anybody's had an epic magical item like that ever.
It can be higher tier, but I think, I mean, it's been many years for me too. It's not like, I mean, because we've been playing lower tier stuff, and a Deck of Anything could obviously appear in a lower tier game. But I think if you use the Deck of Anything in that lower tier game, like the negative stuff really sucks.
Yeah, it's not appropriate, and we play so many things. Like, I wouldn't give up playing all of the games that I've gotten exposed to playing with you guys. I wouldn't give that up to, have a level 20 character, that we've been playing for 5 years. I'm not saying that they aren't both cool, but I have learned so much and learned to actually appreciate the different systems and the different settings and what they have to give by playing more games. That's one of the really cool things I love about our group, is that we're all pretty well, we're up for trying something new. Let's give it a shot. That sounds cool. And there's a lot of great content being produced out there by a lot of companies.
I would love to have a game that either ran or was in for a long time, but my gaming attention deficit disorder just doesn't allow for that. Like, I would be like, oh, we should try this. We should try doing this instead. But what about the game we've been in for 5 years? But they have this game that we should try. Like, I just can't.
Well, then our current group is pretty much perfect for how you
exactly
how you play. Because I mean, truthfully, I also suffer from the same thing where it's like, and this is where you have drop plots and all those kind of things. Is that we play a game, we get I wouldn't say we get bored, but maybe we look at the next shiny, and so if we're not careful, we kind of jump around a little bit, and sometimes our intention to go back to a game is never really realized. I guess is the way I look at it. Is that the characters never get dusted off, or at least they haven't been dusted off. They could be dusted off in the future, but
right. I think one of the things that happens with games is there's a kind of a momentum that you have when you're running a game, and like if a serious interruption comes up, both from the sense of a DM, especially if you're a DM and you're running a game, and you lose that sense of momentum, you start second guessing some of the things that you've done in the game. Like, are they not having fun? And stuff like that. And so sometimes it gets really easy to lose a plot just because of that momentum being kind of run down. Like, if you miss a couple games in a row, it's really hard to just pick that game up where you left off. People have forgotten things. Your interest may have, you may have saw some movie or something that gave you a story idea for something else. Things like that. So, it's all about momentum, and sometimes it's really easy to lose that sort of momentum, especially when you don't play really long periods. Like, if you had a day, like if you had a gaming group where you once a month you took a whole day and you played, that would be different than getting together 2 hours every week or every other week, because you just be able to probably power through a whole story arc in a day versus kind of patchworking together a story like we do sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we talked about it before when we were talking about in the holiday season, we had a lot of interruptions, cancellations, etc., that just kind of made it impossible to meet every week, and that led to holes. And I think we've done a better job recently of powering through those gaps, and at least even if we didn't know precisely what had happened or something like that, at least still picked it up from wherever we were. And of course, me trying to, just as a GM, kind of remind you of major plot points. But again, sometimes the details get lost in those situations. I think it works. So, I mean, we'll we'll continue to play. And honestly, I think aside from the deck of many things, they did talk about the plot points. They talked about things like Vecna coming back as one of the major villains. And it has been so long since I've dealt with a Vecna adjacent game. I probably will at least look into it.
And Cringer, or not, was it Cringer? What is that guy's name?
Venger.
From the Venger. Yeah, Venger. Venger from the classic 1980s cartoon as a villain. They did bring him up as a villain that is returning. Cringer is He-Man's cat, by the way. Venger is the villain from the D&D cartoon. So that was kind of interesting that they talked about bringing him back as well.
Yep. And the Red Wizards of Thay, which, I mean, the one thing I have to say in the movie that they did really well was the overall malevolence of how the Red Wizards exist. You know, their existence is kind of a bad thing. I thought they did a pretty good job, and I think they'll make a great antagonist somewhere.
It's kind of funny that they have kind of a big part, because I believe in all of the Forgotten Realms source books, the Red Wizards of Thay are slavers of a high degree. Like, they have slaves.
Oh, they're bad people. I mean, but what's funny about that is that, and this is where we kind of get into that, what should you include in your game? Because I know we talked about it, like with the Hadozi controversy a little bit, you know, and stuff like that. It's like your villains sometimes just get to be villainous. You know, you don't always have to take the misunderstood bad guy, you know, like in their mind, they're right. Like, Thay and Wizards are just bad people, and they understand. Right. So
well, and the reason that I'm surprised is because it'd be kind of being on record of them saying like Dark Sun isn't going to happen again because of its kind of social commentary, and then to have the Red Wizards start to be a big part again is a little weird to me. But maybe it's a ruse.
The Red Wizards are a ruse, or they're just gonna like drop a bomb of Dark Sun on you and be like, "There you go, Brent.
That
just for you."
That's not gonna. Yeah, that's the ruse right there. The first thing they're gonna put out in the new edition, or not new edition of D&D, is gonna be the Dark Sun supplement, and everybody's gonna be surprised. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. That was more my point. Is that it's just weird to me that they're making such a big deal out of that, and the Red Wizards are like a big component of kind of new stories.
All right.
I'm not bitter, I swear. It's not just me being bitter. Okay, a little.
It's you being bitter. It's okay.
A little.
It's okay. So I guess unless you guys have any other comments, we can kind of end this episode on a couple notes about Session 0 stuff. So anytime you're playing a game, like what is it, you know, what to do when you get your Session 0 going. And I think we may have even talked about Session 0 a little bit in the past, but since we did a Session 0 this time, and I think, you know, Jeff and Brent were kind of the recipients of it, you know, we can talk about some of the best practices we had, just or some of our experiences from last night, because there's even with an experienced group or a group that's played with each other before setting off on a new campaign. And this is different than one shots. I think if you have a one shot, you don't necessarily need to invest as much time. But if you project that you're going to be playing on a campaign that has any sort of meat on that, you're going to want to get this Session 0 together. And so everybody, it's just for anybody that's following along and all that kind of stuff, is Session 0 is basically an establishing expectations session. This is where you discuss all your character options. This is where you discuss campaign settings, scheduling. I mean, this is where you get all of the mechanical minutia sorted out, so that, you know, you don't go, "Oh, I thought we were meeting every week," and then somebody else is like, "Well, I thought we were meeting every other week." That kind of stuff is just, that's like not a great way to go about it, and that could easily happen. People miscommunicate about all the weirdest shit all the time. So Session 0 just kind of level sets expectations and makes sure that people are creating characters that will fit the story that you want to play through. So so last night's Session 0, I mean, what do you guys like? I guess, did you guys feel like that was a good Session 0, or do you think that there was areas that you didn't like per se?
I guess since I was the one impacted by it the most,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible, and it didn't hurt that we did it in the Session 0. But maybe if before that you had, you know, emailed us you're kind of, hey, here's the setting, here's kind of where it's taking place,
Mhm.
and told us a little bit more about it. I know we talked about it a little bit when we did the one shot because it's the same setting,
Mhm.
and maybe I missed it, but had I known that, I probably would have come with a different character instead of the character, instead of trying to continue with the character that I had from the one shot.
Mhm.
But that was a small thing. I mean, the DM, saying that these classes are playable. Here's where it is. Here's the books you can use. Here's the books that I'm excluding, and here's why. Not, and there wasn't a ton of that, but given our setting,
Mhm.
being a magic user, you got to be on your toes.
Yeah.
And so I changed my character around a little bit, but I thought we worked through it just fine. I liked the session zero. I liked
Yeah.
setting
Yeah,
the boundaries for what we're doing.
I think the session zero is good simply because it kind of. I talk a lot about that social contract idea where it gives you idea of what type of like what the interactions are going to be like in the game, and for any setting that's either homebrew or different. Like if I was going to run a Dark Sun game, it's perfect time to bring up the fact that magic is harder. It's outlawed. There is going to be topics of slavery and things like that in the game, and like these are all important things in the setting that I think in a session zero that you kind of
Mhm.
establish and give a person a moment to say, hey, I'm not, even if they say I'm not really interested in playing in a setting like that. It gives you the chance to maybe to go back to the drawing board and find out if it's the game that you want to run is the game that they want to play. Um, or maybe retrigger kind of what you want out of your game.
Mhm.
And I think that's sort of like social contract, and setting that up is very important
Mhm.
No, it's
for the
it's
game. I think
huge.
like if we would have just went forward with this game and you dropped it on Jeff when he was playing the character in the game, like it definitely would inspire more feels badsies than discussing it before the game starts. Even in the sense of like party balance, it's good to like talk and be like, hey, I'm gonna play a rogue. Hey, I'm gonna play a rogue too.
Mhm.
Does one of the players maybe have a problem with that? Like it gives you kind of a chance to like either talk it out and be like, well, I'm going to play this type of rogue. Are you going to be significantly different than that?
Mhm.
And so two people don't kind of cross paths or step on each other's toes. Or if you're going to do something like what we're doing, where we don't have a balanced party, we don't have the normal Dungeons and Dragons fighter cleric sort of makeup, which is pretty common for our games because I'll always say this. I think that's one thing that's not always the best, in my opinion, about kind of D&D is this idea that you need a balanced party for all of the combat challenges. And so, but like your GM should know that
Mhm.
because a lot of the stuff is written with that in mind. So if you're not playing a party like that, it could be easy, like especially if you're doing like a pre-done adventure. Like the pre-done adventure is going to assume most likely that you have a fighter, a cleric, a wizard, that sort of party setup. And if it's important to say, I'm playing a pre-written adventure, so if you don't have these, some of the combats might be hard.
Mhm.
Or two, as the GM, take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to have to change some of the stuff in this pre-written adventure to
Mhm.
kind of meet the fact that they're not going to have a guy with a lot of hit points or somebody to heal them,
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think and when it comes down to the kind of game that you're going to run, I mean, outside of that, again, it's about how do you create a character that fits the game that everyone's going to be playing, and I agree with you guys 100%. And it's interesting because it tends to be this group, and it always makes me like think of those tropes or memes where it's like nobody wants to play the cleric, and so your guys' healing is always usually subpar in the games that we play. So it does increase, the deadliness of the game considerably in some encounters and all that kind of stuff, especially from a combat perspective. But I don't think it's fair to penalize you guys and basically say, "Uh-oh, somebody isn't playing a cleric, so you guys are gonna, every encounter is going
Mhm.
to be a deadly encounter just because you don't have healing." Now, you guys have marginal healing, obviously, through I think one of our characters is an alchemist, and there's ways around it in Pathfinder where you guys can get healing potions to kind of, you know, hopefully mitigate some of those types of things. But it's always a funny thing to, to your point, like if I told you guys, okay, well, who's going to be the fighter, who's going to be the priest, who's going to be the mage, and who's going to be the rogue, like you guys would be like, what the fuck is this, Mike? What?
Yeah.
Like why are we taking this kind of like modular, cookie cutter approach to building our party, and kind of taking away our agency as to what we get to pick and all that? Like the first person gets the class they want if it's presented, but nobody else does.
I think it would work. I think we would make it work. Knowing us and how we're all pretty amicable, I think we would be able to fall in line with that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that, and if people say that they don't want to do that, like that would be a good thing to cover in a session 0.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I need you guys to each play a certain class, or I need at least one of you to play a cleric.
Mm-hmm.
And then who wants to play the cleric? Do you want to roll for it, or how can we make this a character that somebody likes? And you can kind of discuss those things. But yeah, so that's, I think that's a perfect thing to cover in a session 0, is if you do need something like that to happen. Also, it's good to, if you're in a party that's going to do something like, oh, we're all going to play bards this game. That's definitely something that's probably good to let your GM know, because it's definitely not going to, like, most adventures definitely aren't going to be angled towards that sort of thing. So like it's important to just have that discussion, like what type of game we're playing. This is the setting I think we're playing in. Is that okay with everybody? Does anybody have any concerns?
Mm-hmm.
What classes are we playing? And this is a little bit different from a normal session 0, because we all had kind of ideas of what we wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
The only one with a significant wrench was Jeff, fortunately.
Yeah. I also like the fact that, and Mike, I think you go out of your way to do it every time we do a session 0, is to talk about the kind of things that the situations you don't want to DM,
mm-hmm.
the kinds of things that you want to not have as part of the game, and then give us as players the ability to also say, I agree with you. I don't want to do those 3 or 4 or 5 things. I also don't want to. I have no interest in role-playing things in this area either. So that we all, as Brent said, I like that term, the social contract, that we all understand what we're getting into, and nobody has to go, 4 sessions in and go, I don't like where this is going, and I don't want to play anymore because I'm uncomfortable with the fact that we're role-playing these specific situations.
And even last night, it was kind of funny because the idea was brought up. Well, how do you get information out without torture, right? And so, I mean, I guess we could put an opinion poll: is that how many groups allow for torture from the PCs to the NPCs to get info? Like, is that your gather information, or do you guys just roll? Like, I mean, and have that fade to black off screen.
I mean, that's a pretty murder hobo like
mm-hmm.
party like standby. Like, if you listen to most podcasts, at some point somebody's like, I cut their finger off or something. Like, I mean, it's not like it's a murder hobo trope that comes up because, like,
sure,
most actual players don't, like, how do you get people to disclose information when they don't want to disclose information?
But I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure that they're greatly written scenarios if the only way for you to progress the plot is to get some hidden piece of information out of one character, and you just all happen to have 10 charismas and fail every roll. And so the only thing you can, as and I've done it, I'm not here to, we've gone there, and I don't care to go back there because it's not a fun place for everybody. And I think that there's more creative ways, and as players, we have to get more creative. I think as GMs and as people writing scenarios have to get a little more creative. It's weak writing if everything hinges on that one person's secret information.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that I've been learning a lot is that, provide multiple solutions to your players, because it's always funny to me, and I think we discussed this before, where it was like, I feel like I'm dumbing it down and making it too easy. Whereas you guys are like, oh, thank God there are these extra clues. It's different viewpoints of the same situation. Is that, I feel like, I'm making it too easy and giving you gimmies, and you guys are just like, oh, I found this good clue. This is really good. And it's just, we just don't see the same information sometimes.
Well, it's that old writing trope, whereas it's like you might write something and like, oh, this is brilliant. Everybody's going to understand this. This is clear. It's concise. Everyone's going to know what I'm talking about. It's good. And then you send it to the editor, and the editor's like, what the fuck is this? What, I don't even understand. How does this connect to the rest of the story? And at that point, you have to be like, oh, and then you have to go back and rewrite it. And that's the thing, is like, the way you interpret it in your brain is a lot of times a lot different than your players are going to.
Hmm.
And especially for people, like, because what's probably going to happen is one person is going to think of some crazy answer, and then one person's going to go, oh yeah, he's probably right, and then one person might go, well, maybe it's this other insane answer, and then at that point you have two insane answers, neither of which are potentially right, with one person like agreeing with the other person. And so
And,
at
and
that
the fourth
point,
person going, I wasn't really listening.
right. And so at that point, it's like, what do you do? Like, you have to you have to rein them in a little bit. So,
Yeah.
so I think it's anytime you can throw something out there as a GM to guide them a little bit without like, and it's not railroading, because it's like not being like, this is your only answer. It's, well, you do remember this too. And then
Mhm.
if they choose to make the wrong choice, like, then it's like,
Yeah.
well,
So
that's just kind of how the game goes.
it is true. So I guess in terms of like session zero stuff, I mean, I don't think we're going to dive in too deep on it, but in terms of like what, because we're an established group, but if you're a non-established group, or you plan on running for people that you haven't played with before, or maybe you're playing with friends that, you're getting them to their first D&D game. Did you guys watch that like D&D music video that they had on the D&D Direct? Brett
That was
sounds.
my least favorite part.
It was-
I appreciate the art. I did. Somebody put in a lot of work, but I did not.
I
care
was
for
like,
the
how
singing.
how long is this, and how far do I have to go to skip this?
Yeah. It was, I mean, it was kind of fun, because it basically was like, how do you bring your friends along for the ride, and kind of talking about that stuff. And I think with Session Zero, there are some really great guides out there. And I in terms of plugs, one of the things that I think I used it a while ago, and I've always kind of kept it in my favorites, is that Bob the World Builder. He's a D&D related channel and everything like that. He did some stuff, and he has a pretty good Session Zero checklist that I think encompasses a lot of the most important questions. Because I mean, every ultimate checklist could be as detailed or as slight as you want, but I think he asked a lot of really good questions that, I mean, is applicable to any group, especially if you have never played with that group before. So if you're looking for an actual detailed checklist, go find Bob the World Builder's video. It's really good for understanding, like, when to use it, how to use it, and the step by steps of it. Although from like an experienced group perspective, I think having that Session Zero to level set the campaign, set yourselves up for an understanding of what the storyline is, make sure that your characters gel. And I really appreciate, in this we've been adding more ways to kind of collaborate and talk about how do you guys generate characters together, because I think the one thing that's nice about Session Zero is you actually build characters together somewhat. And I could immediately tell as soon as the momentum got going with, and it was interesting. I didn't expect the person to speak up first to be the person who spoke up first. I'm not going to say their name or anything like that, but you guys know who I'm talking about. He just
Mhm.
dropped a hammer, and he was like, "Okay, mic drop. What, you guys go?" And he kind of jumped out of there. I was like, out of nowhere.
I think
Like,
one thing in this case is, I think the fantasy, like, I think he's more comfortable with the fantasy stuff, and
mhm.
we haven't really been doing straight like fantasy games. So I think this might be a little bit more in his wheelhouse, and I think that'll be fun. It was a surprise, and it really got the ball rolling and broke the ice for the
Mhm.
rest of us throwing it in there. So
Yeah, that was
I am
awesome.
disappointed we're no longer. I am disappointed we're no longer the short team, but because there's only a halfling and a goblin now. So we're only half short now.
Half short. No, that's fine. I personally thought it was pretty good. Just to see, like I said, you guys collaborate, and it is interesting how you guys went from like the lowercase a team to what you guys are now. But I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a fun campaign. And obviously, if you've reached to this end of the episode and you want us to start posting actual plays, you're gonna have to let us know, because that's not really a nearby thing, a near term thing for us to post actual plays. We're more going to just continue to talk about our sessions, what we've experienced, what went well, what didn't go well. Um, why I retire as a DM and what these guys did to me. Just kidding. That's fair.
Well, yeah, if you like, and if you like the story updates, like the session 0, or kind of talking about the stories like we did with mysteries, please let us know. It's kind of a content. The recaps for us have been good, and they're fun and good content for us when we can't think of anything else. So let us know if you like it, if you made this far in the thing.
So yeah, so with this being I guess the end of our journey today, this being our first video episode, Jeff, do you want to let us know, or let everybody know how they can reach us, and then Brent, get us signed out?
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, then look for us on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. It's at Rollwise. If you want to email us, it's rollwiseguys@gmail.com. And, if you found some value in the content, like and subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you want to hear. Brent, it's all you know.
As always, we want to thank everybody who took the time to spend this time with us. And we just want to say thank you, and be safe out there. And as always, roll well and roll wise.
See ya.
And scene.